Yo, what is going on, guys? So more bringing guys a brand new Busch Gardens video, Busch Gardens-ish video. We're gonna talk about something that's kinda related to Busch Gardens Williamsburg, but not really, but we're gonna say it is, so it falls under the same category as all the other videos I've been doing. Before we jump into this exciting topic, if you're not subscribed already, what are you doing? Make sure to subscribe. And two, got a new single dropping Friday called Feel Alive. Super exciting song. The pre-save link is down below in the description, so make sure to go check that out after watching this video, of course. In today's video, we're going to be talking about something that maybe you don't know about, but it's something that's actually pretty exciting. Busch Gardens Williamsburg almost had some competition back in the 1990s in the form of a Disney park. And you're probably like, what do you mean? Well, there was almost a Disney park in Virginia. Now, not near Williamsburg, but this park would have been a couple hours north, right outside of DC, and it would have been called Disney's America. I might get some things wrong. I am not a Disney expert. As many of you know, I just went to Disney a few months ago and kind of went down this Disney rabbit hole, which actually got me started on making these types of videos. I'm going to be kind of meshing both worlds together in this, just like I did in the IP video, which was the first one I did of all these. We're going to jump into what was Disney's America, what was it meant to be, what was it going to be, and why it's probably a good thing it didn't actually happen. What was the park? It was not going to be your normal Disney park. It was not going to be like Disney World or Disneyland in California or all these other Disney parks around the world. It was not going to be like that. If it's right out of DC, Disney wanted to tap into the historical area, right, with the tourists. Factually, they wanted to kind of take some of the tourists away from Jamestown, Yorktown, Kings Dominion, Busch Gardens. Walt Disney always had the idea of his parks not just being about entertainment, but also education. And this park was evolving off that idea, kinda, teaching people about America and different phases of American history by reenactments, recreations, simulated towns being lands in the park. And it was actually kind of a cool idea. I think the idea of it was cool. With so much constant turmoil and the way we see certain things about America's past, it's kind of controversial. It's like, how would you portray parts of America's history? Because there's some dark times and there's some things that we don't really want to see recreated. So in 1993, Disney announced that they had bought this land in Haymarket, Virginia, and they were going to build a new Disney park with resort hotels, an RV park, a golf course, and just a bunch of land. Because, you know, when Disney comes, they don't just have one piece. They like to take a big slice of the pie. So they were going to have a bunch of land in Virginia, which raised a lot of concerns because there's a lot of farming that happens in Virginia. And a lot of farmers are like, you're taking a big hit on our farmland in Northern Virginia. And a lot of locals to the area were like, we don't want Disney here. One thing is that it will kind of take away from the actual historical stuff, because they're going to be doing this fancy. Disney always took their liberties with historical events, so it was going to be a little bit of a, this happened, but we're going to take this twist on it. And people, especially in the DC area, were like, our history is our history. Don't alter it, don't twist it, don't even make the slightest change to it, because everything that happened formed what America is today. And it's kind of hard to balance that, especially when you're Disney, when your whole idea is, we're the best, we're everything's happy, we're the happiest people, we're the most magical people. And it's like, how are you going to transcribe that with our American history? Let's be honest here, it would not have had a castle. Was it really even a Disney park? It just feels like it was going to be a Disney park that was going to be this outlier. I think it's a good thing it didn't happen. But let's actually dive in. And most of these videos, especially when I talk about Busch Gardens, I kind of go off the cuff. But this time we're actually going to have to be reading from an article. It's a lot of information to make sure I get it right and I don't get anything wrong. So this was brought up by Michael Eisner. And when Michael Eisner took over as Disney CEO, he tried to make as much money as he could, which is not a bad thing. Depending on which Disney fans you ask, he was great for Disney, terrible for Disney, right in the middle, because he axed some things that were crucial to the park, but also pretty much kept the parks alive to this day. So Michael Eisner was like, we're going to bring this park because we want to become one with the American history. So what started the idea for this park? Well, a few years before they announced the park in 1993, Michael Eisner and a few other of his associates took a trip to Colonial Williamsburg. They came with the concept for the park, and then they went for 2 years and scouted Washington, D.C. in the 1991-1993 leading up to the announcement. Before they even announced the park, there was already some controversy about Explore Park, and they accused Disney of trying to steal their ideas because Disney was scouting, because we all know Disney's no secret. Whatever they do is either going to get leaked, they'll announce it. They really can't do anything top secret. The only thing they can do top secret is Marvel scripts. And if you know their whole Reddit situation, they're kind of slacking in that area too. But when they announced it in November 1993, Disney had acquired 3,000 acres. The governor of Virginia at the time was supporting Michael Eisner in this endeavor, and political support and official support was actually pretty high for this project because it's more money. So obviously that park was getting a lot of backing. However, from the locals, there was a lot of, don't do this. You're going to bring unwanted attention to our cities. You're going to take away from the actual historic monuments and landmarks, and it's going to be bad for the farmland. It's just going to bring so much congested traffic, and if you've ever been in DC traffic, it does not need to be any worse than it already is. The people who are constructing the park said, you know what, we're going to make it a one-day experience where you travel through the history of America. And as we go through this, as you break down the live shows and stuff, it just sounds kind of boring. It really felt like the park was not going to have a Disney flair. It was more of a bunch of like history fans got together and made a park, but they're also just big fans of Disney and slapped the Disney logo on there with a few other things. Like, where would you put Mickey in this? Donald Duck, Goofy. Like, where were you going to put these characters and not get pushback or backlash? If the park was going to be built in Virginia, guess where that money also comes from for constructing it? Virginia taxpayer pockets. And with a price of $163 million at that time, so with inflation, and that was 30 years ago, so imagine how much it would be now. We're talking in the 300 millions. And not also to mention the construction of the park, but the Prince William County also wanted to get money from Virginia to improve sewer lines, roads, and any type of utility type based stuff in the area, because you're going to have a lot more travelers, a lot more tourists, a lot more workers going up there, and it's just going to be a lot more traffic in general, not just like physically car traffic, but just traffic in every sense you could imagine. There were actual literal protests. There are signs. You can find news coverings where there were people outside of these government buildings protesting the site. There are people at the site of where the park was going to be when they were about to start construction, and like, please don't build this here. And it's in some of those rare moments where everyday people won. But the park really didn't actually last too long in its conceptual state, because it got announced in 1993 and canned in 1994. Now it was canned. They tried to still have plans for another park somewhere still in Virginia, but I would not put it past them if they tried to go into Williamsburg, because it was still the idea of making an American history theme park. We got the historic triangle of Yorktown, Jamestown, Colonial Williamsburg. So they were going to target there. And imagine how different Williamsburg would feel. Williamsburg is such a beautiful city. It's my favorite city in the whole entire world, because there's so much there, but it feels colonial to the state. There's a feel to everything. Everything is brick. It's just so pretty. I just love it. The traffic's not too crazy. And Busch Gardens is there, but it does feel like an outlier. It feels like it belongs there. Water Country feels like perfect there. And you got all these other historical things. There's so much fun. There's so much history. And you're not far from the beach. And you got Yorktown Beach. And you got the James River. You got all these cool things. And if Disney came, it would just elevate the area. And maybe that's a good thing for the area to be elevated. But I don't know. I'm glad it didn't. But you know what? We're talking about numbers and everything. And we're talking about the actual side. Let's talk about what it would have actually been. Because, as you know, if you have a Disney park, or just like Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, you have areas. Where in Disney parks, you have Tomorrowland, Fantasyland, Frontierland, Adventureland. In Main Street USA, and in Busch Gardens, you have Italy, England, Germany, Scotland, France, New France, Oktoberfest, Ireland. So let's just talk about what it would have been. Because there would not have been the lands that you would get in a normal Disney park. No. It was going to be a brand new, reimagined way of doing it. So you have Crossroads USA, which would have been this park's version of Main Street USA. And luckily we do have some concepts of what the park was going to maybe look like, so we'll be able to use that. And this would have taken place from the years 1800 to 1850, a pre-Civil War era village that would have served as a hub for Disney's America. Guests would enter under an 1840s train trestle, which would have featured antique steam trains circling the park. According to an early map, this land would have featured a large amphitheater, a show named The Muppets Take America, and something themed around the roots. Basically, when you walk into a Disney park, you walk under the train, because Walt Disney loved trains. That was his whole reason for building a park in general, so he could have a train that went around it, and then you walk under it just like you do it in a regular Disney park, and then you had the theater to the right, which you always have in a Disney park. So, you know, if you get the idea. If you've been in a Disney park, imagine yourself walking through Main Street USA, and just imagine it being very different and not as pretty. It would not have been as pretty. That's the whole thing. Disney parks are very pretty. This one really wouldn't have been. Then you have Native America that would take place from the years 1600 to 1810. A wide gap of time, which is a recreation of a Native American village that would have reflected the tribes that were known in that part of the country. Guests would have enjoyed interactive experiences, exhibits, and arts and crafts, as well as a whitewater river raft ride, like Roman Rapids, that would have traveled through the area based on the Lewis and Clark expedition. This is where things get really controversial. The Lewis and Clark expedition helped grow America to the size it is today. But the things that had to happen for America to grow, how do you make that good for Disney? How do you make that look great? You can't. The whitewater river raft ride, I think that actually sounds cool. I think kind of having a water raft ride that kind of goes like the historical ways and like you're going through the land. But I can't imagine what that follow through would have been like. It's just weird. And it's hard to really pinpoint, like, if you take a regular Disney park and then you have these lands, aside from Crossroads USA, it's really hard to figure out which one would have been which. But now we have President's Square, which would have taken from the years 1750 to 1800, a celebration of the birth of democracy and those who fought to preserve it. The Hall of Presidents and the American adventure from Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom would have been replicated or relocated in this section of Disney's America. If you've been to Disney and you've been to the Hall of the Presidents and you've been to Liberty Square, that's pretty much what this would be. I imagine a carbon copy of Liberty Square, just named differently, just without Haunted Mansion if you're talking about the Walt Disney World version. I mean, what's a Disney park without the Hatbox Ghost? I mean, honestly. So then you have Civil War Fort that takes place in the years 1850 to 1870. A Civil War fort would have plunged guests into a more turbulent time of American history, with an adjacent replica battlefield where Civil War reenactments would be staged, and an adjacent man-made Freedom Bay where the water battles between the Monitor and the Merrimack would have been staged as a thrilling nighttime spectacular. So instead of fireworks, you get a reenactment of a water battle. The word is they openly admit that in that it would be a controversial time. How are you going to portray that? And it being 1998, looking at how the past 30 years have transpired, this park would not survive today. The amount of changes they have to make to the park is insane. And if you actually look back, one of the reasons they got canned was because they knew they'd have to keep making alterations, because we're still making historical discoveries. We're still learning about stuff done in the past, and you're going to make a land about that and try to make the controversial Disney-fied? That's not how it works. Now you have Enterprise, which is 1870 to 1930. A mock factory town. It would have highlighted American ingenuity, where guests could have ridden a major attraction called Industrial Revolution, traveling on a roller coaster type ride through a 19th century landscape with heavy industry and blast furnaces. On either side of the ride would have been exhibits of technology that defined America's history and developments that would have defined future industries. So kind of sounds like Spaceship Earth, where you go to communication on Earth. So like a more focused version, just focus on American Revolution during the Industrial Revolution, and having a roller coaster called the Industrial Revolution. It just, the whole park screams tourist cash grab. There's no thought put into any of this. There's no thought, there's no compassion, there's no thoughts, there's no love. It's just what can make us money. It's like they read a history book, wrote down the ideas, said, do you know what would be cool, without actually taking into consideration who could be affected by this? Where are their historical inaccuracies? It just doesn't sound great. The optics are not great, but we're not done. We're only about halfway through. Then we have We the People from 1870 to 1930, a replica of Ellis Island building, which acted as a gateway to America for many immigrants in the 19th and early 20th century, with music, restaurants, and a live show. There's some things where I don't understand, right? Let's keep going. Then you have Family Farm, 1930 to 1945, a recreation of an authentic farm where guests could have had the opportunity to see different types of industries related to food production, in addition to hands-on experiences. Now, this one is actually cool, especially because I grew up in the country around a lot of farmland. So farming has always been something that has been around. This is actually a cool thing because you're teaching a lot of people about the things that they love every day, how that stuff is made, how that stuff is grown, how it is produced. That is awesome, and it reminds me kind of living with the land in Epcot, but just more focused on the farming aspect of it, which is really cool. And it really seems like you take the idea of Epcot and then you take the like American Revolution part of Epcot, and you blend the two, and then make that into a whole park, but not as pretty. That's what I feel like this park would have been. But we got two more. Let's keep going. 1930 to 1945, which is called State Fair, an area based on Midwest with a live show about baseball and Coney Island themed rides, including a 60-foot Ferris wheel and a wooden roller coaster. Now this is actually pretty cool because it's something a wooden roller coaster and a Ferris wheel is something you only get in Disney's California Adventure. And because this park was canned, a lot of these ideas got used at Disney's California Adventure. So you look at the Ferris wheel and then you have the Incredicoaster. This is where those ideas were born. So like I said, the idea for the park and stuff that they wanted to do inside the park are really good. The execution of how they shaped the park and styled the park, that's where it's just a little weird. But last but not least, Victory Field, 1930 to 1945. Guests would have experienced what American soldiers faced in the defense of freedom during World Wars. It would have been themed to resemble an airfield with a series of hangars containing attractions based on America's military might using virtual reality technology. Now granted, this was the 90s. What exactly was that VR tech going to be? The airfield would have also served as an exhibit of airplanes from different periods as well as major flying exhibitions. Concepts for what would have been the world's first dueling inverted roller coasters, that sounds so cool, which would have been named Dogfighter, were drawn up, but were ultimately abandoned due to the cost of the attraction. The ride would have had guests flying through the air in German and American biplane-themed trains and would have featured several near misses. Both tracks would have featured inversions. The American track featured a cobra roll, a vertical loop, a zero-G roll, and 2 corkscrews. The German track featured the same elements with an extra corkscrew leading to the final brake run. And at one point, the German train would have come close to hitting both the floor and walls of a trench and a tank as it looped over a tank and had crashed into the trench. So, this one sounds cool. That roller coaster sounds sick. A dueling roller coaster with all that in it, with near misses. Now that sounds cool. Here's the controversial part. Not only do you get an American plane, get a German plane. So, are you going to put a roller coaster with a swastika on a roller coaster at a Disney park? Or on anything? How did this plan make it past a board meeting? How did it actually get approved and actually get announced to be built here in Virginia? I don't understand. And the fact that this would have been the most popular park in Virginia had it been built, because yes, it would have been more popular than King's Dominion, more popular than Busch Gardens. I said it, because of one thing, Disney. And where are you putting Mickey in all this? You don't get any Disney characters mentioned in this, but you know they would have been there and they would have been integrated. And how would they have been integrated? I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to know. There's a lot of question marks, and this is a very broad explanation of what the park would have been, and there's part of me that's like, man, I wonder what it would have been like, especially because a lot of this is based off of, the more you dive in, it's based off of reenactments of all these periods, and I'm not going to go into all the reenactments that they had planned, but let's just say, why would they even consider some of that? So to say that the park was a controversial idea is a bit of an understatement. I'm glad the people of Virginia and Washington, D.C., and probably some of Maryland, because the whole DMV area, I'm glad they spoke up and they fought against it, because as much as I would love to have a regular Disney park here in Virginia, I don't know if it's completely off the table. It's not going to be any variation of this idea. Just a Disney park in general, Virginia would be sick. That park would not survive today. But there was one thing that was actually pretty cool that they had called the Streets of America, which was going to be a dining district featuring different styles of food, which from Chicago, Los Angeles, New Orleans, New York City, St. Louis, San Francisco. That would have been really cool. So there's, like I said, there's a lot of cool ideas in here, but it's just overshadowed by the controversial and kind of side of what they were going to do. But yeah, I feel like a lot of people didn't know that Virginia almost had a Disney park. Busch Gardens almost had competition, but Busch Gardens has no competition in Virginia. So let me know what you guys think about this. Would you have wanted this park? If so, I would love to hear why. Are you glad that it got canned? If so, I'd love to hear why. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to go check out my other Busch Gardens videos. Make sure to go pre-save my new single, Feel Alive. Link in the description down below. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Make sure that bell button down below so you're notified every single time I upload a brand new video to the channel. And there's so much more to unpack from this. If you want to make a part 2 where we go even more into what this park would have been, I'm down. So just let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Remorse and I'm out. Peace!